Greetings and welcome back. You're tuned into TMH Daily English News. The headlines today: the Tigrayan government urges the international community to put pressure on the Ethiopian government to allow free flow of humanitarian aid within the Tigray region. U.S. Senator has urged his country to hold the Abiy Ahmed government accountable and ensure his new rhetoric is matched by action thereafter. And Human Rights Watch urges the UN to reject Ethiopian government efforts to deny funds for the Human Rights Violations Probe Commission. As we move on to the main stories, the Tigrayan government has urged the international community to put pressure on the Ethiopian government and allow free flow of humanitarian aid into Tigray. Member of Tigray Armed Forces Central Command, Getachew Reda, told Tigray TV that the government of Tigray will honor the cessation of hostilities as long as it is in the best interests of the people of Tigray. He also emphasized, however, the government of Tigray does not expect it to be a publicity exercise and as it is a life and death issue. Let's take a listen.
The reason why we are saying this has to be done within a reasonable time frame is simply a function of the fact that if such humanitarian access, unfettered humanitarian access is not allowed within a reasonable time frame, the kind of famine situation that our people are facing has reached a point where it has now become untenable for us to wait more weeks or months. So essentially what we are saying is this is a life and death issue, and then we expect the international community to get its access together and to bring its pressure to bear on the government in Addis Ababa to keep its end of the agreement. So as long as our people's needs are going to be met, we're not going to put conditions. We'll be extending whatever amount of cooperation is required of us.
Getachew Reda also asked the international community to bring its pressure to bear on the Ethiopian government to finally honor in its end of the agreement, which has so far not been realized yet.
Many international civil servants, especially those who are involved in humanitarian operations, have been on record saying that this rather sluggish response toward the humanitarian crisis in Tigray is a stain in their conscience. This is something every Westerner, every Western official would say in public and should say in public. It exactly is a stain in their conscience. It's a stain in our conscience. To allow a government to continue to exterminate its own people, to use hunger as a weapon, it should remain a stain in their conscience. We can understand why the focus on Ukraine is much more lopsided compared to the focus on Tigray. We can understand. Yes, Ukraine deserves all the attention it is getting, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the international community should abandon other hotspots such as Tigray altogether. Still, as I say, it's better late than never, and the international community can still do by way of bringing its pressure to bear on the government in Addis or its partners in Asmara to allow for unfettered humanitarian access. I think it behooves the international community to once again dispense with this sometimes nonsensical discussion about how many trucks will make it to Tigray. It's not a question of 20 trucks, it's not a question of 1,000 trucks. It is a question of ensuring unfettered access to humanitarian aid to the needy, whether they are in Tigray or in Amhara or in Afar.
Getachew said that it won't be in the best interest of the Ethiopian government and its accomplices to continue to push for a military solution because it won't work now as it never worked in the first time around as well. U.S. Senator Jeff Merkley urged the U.S. to hold the Abiy Ahmed government accountable and ensure his new rhetoric is matched by action. The Oregon senator and member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee released a statement regarding the committee passage of the Ethiopian Peace and Stabilization Act, also known as S-3199, in the ongoing diplomatic negotiations to resolve the humanitarian crisis within Ethiopia. Merkley said the bill serves as an important tool to encourage the Abiy Ahmed government and armed groups to negotiate in good faith for an inclusive peace process that reflects the diverse ethnic makeup of the entirety of Ethiopia. The bill leaders incorporated Merkley's amendments to help ensure the humanitarian aid, in fact, gets into Ethiopia. The senator said he's disturbed by the government's humanitarian blockade of the Tigray region, and it is estimated that 700 trucks per week are needed to reverse the famine conditions in Tigray, but no trucks have been able to transport humanitarian aid or fuel into the area since last year in December. No agriculture inputs have been delivered to the region since July 2021 either. Merkley stated that the Abiy Ahmed government must continue to take concrete steps toward peace, including releasing all remaining political prisoners and ensuring the delivery of aid, a key condition of the Tigray Forces agreement to respect the cessation of these hostilities. He also urged the U.S. to hold Abiy Ahmed's government accountable and ensure his new rhetoric is matched by action, while also recognizing that the Tigray forces and other militias respond constructively in kind. By including a variety of sanctions, this bill incentivizes all parties to end the fighting, but critically, it also provides carrots and sanctions waiver if things move in the right direction, he explained. And again, according to Merkley, the bill gives the Biden administration the flexibility to capitalize on the Abiy Ahmed's government recent overtures if merited by providing international financial institution assistance as well. The United Front of Ethiopian Federalism and Confederalism Forces has urged the U.S. Congress to pass the two draft legislations on Ethiopia to facilitate peace, stability, and accountability within the country. The United Front of Ethiopia Federalism and Confederalism Forces issued a press statement yesterday on the continued denial of humanitarian access to the besieged Tigray region. The statement lauded the leadership shown by the Senate Foreign Relations Committee and the House Foreign Affairs Committee in passing S-3199 and H.R. 6600. It also urged the U.S. Congress to do the same. The United Front of Ethiopian Federalism and Confederalism Forces urged the international community to cautiously view the government's promise of free flow of humanitarian aid, given its track record of lying and being in denial previously. The statement pointed out that the Ethiopian troops are massing near the border of Tigray, and high-ranking military officials have been shuttling between Addis Ababa and Asmara to coordinate joint operations within plans of reinvading the Tigray region. It also recalled that the Ethiopian National Defense Forces Deputy Chief of Staff General Abebaw Taddese, as well as the Amhara and Afar regional leaders, have publicly stated their intentions of renewed invasions of Tigray. The statement added the international community must take concrete actions to ensure the unfettered humanitarian aid enters into Tigray and that a renewed offensive on the Tigray region and its operations does not take place. The United Front of Ethiopian Federalism and Confederalism Forces also urged the international community to support a permanent negotiated ceasefire to be allowed by an all-inclusive political dialogue to bring an end to the political crisis that's currently in Ethiopia. Human Rights Watch also urged the UN to reject Ethiopian government efforts to deny the funds for Human Rights Violations Probe Commission. HRW said United Nations member countries should resist the Ethiopian government's effort at the UN General Assembly Budget Committee to deny the funding for a new commission in the UN, which has created to investigate possible war crimes and other violations that took place in northern Ethiopia. In December, the UN Human Rights Council established the UN Commission of Human Rights Experts on Ethiopia, but it first needs a budget as well as staff. Since the outbreak of armed conflict in November of 2020 in Ethiopia's Tigray region, Ethiopian authorities have rejected calls for international investigations and downplayed or denied serious abuses. Now, with the apparent backing of Russia and China, the government is to kill off the commission before it gets to work off by removing its budget and axing all proposed staff positions. Human Rights Watch stated UN members should reject Ethiopia's latest efforts to prevent scrutiny of its actions in northern Ethiopia, as well as ensure that the Commission has resources and staff necessary to investigate the crimes that have been committed by all sides. Ethiopia's proposed defunding of the Commission is expected to be put into vote in the UN General Assembly, the Fifth Committee specifically, which handles budgetary issues, later this week. The conflict in northern Ethiopia has involved serious rights violations and left millions displaced. Credible reports of serious abuses continue. The Fifth Committee role is to allocate the funding needed for UN mechanisms to carry out their mandated tasks. Human Rights Watch noted, yet Ethiopia, its allies, are attempting to use the budget negotiations as a backdoor to revisit and undermine decisions made by the other UN bodies. In most recent years, China, Russia, and their allies have repeatedly tried to hijack the budget discussions in an attempt to relitigate human rights mechanisms created by Human Rights Council or the General Assembly. HRW said stressed concern in the states about justice for victims of human rights violations in Ethiopia should push back against such efforts of curtail funding for the Commission. It added that they should also get the Commission up and running fully funded as soon as possible. A Tigrayan woman has been gang raped and tortured by 16 Eritrean and Amhara soldiers in front of her son for a whole week, speaking of her plight with TMH. Timnit Bayru has more on this story, filed by TMH's Medhin Gabraselassie, and we warn you that these are extremely graphic expressions that you might find disturbing. Let's take a listen. Mabrit is a 25-year-old mother of two. She used to live in Shararo town in northwestern Tigray. She had a good married life before the ongoing genocidal war on the people of Tigray turned her world upside down. Hers is a typical story of the unprecedented atrocities inflicted on women and girls of Tigray. Mabrit was gang raped and tortured by 16 Eritrean and Amhara soldiers right in front of her son for an entire week. I was returning to my place in Shararo from Shura Indeselassie, where I had gone to withdraw money. Upon seeing the soldiers, my son started crying as he's used to seeing these soldiers mistreating people all the time. They forced me out of the public transportation I was in and started to drag me around. They took me to the wilderness, then told me they were HIV positive and were selected and deployed to Tigray on purpose to infect Tigrayan mothers. I begged them to leave me alone and told them I was already ill. My son was crying all the way, but the soldiers swore to delegate and told him to go back. They beat him hard and he fell to the ground, breaking his teeth. There were 16 of them. They tied my arms behind my back and beat me. They not only gang raped me, but also tortured me by burning my body with plastic. Mabrit is now suffering from permanent injuries of serious burns on her breasts and private parts. They inflicted damage on her womb, and as a result, one part of it has been removed surgically, while the other part has serious injury with constant hemorrhages. She is thus deprived of her natural capacity to give birth. Our final update for today, the global community has been urged to step into the salvaged Tigray's cultural heritage. An article published by The Conversation warned that the Ethiopian war in Tigray risks wiping out centuries of the world's history. Timnit Bayru presents the story.
The human carnage and heritage destruction in Ethiopia's Tigray region that began in November 2020 has been devastating. Thousands have been killed, millions displaced, and several historical monuments damaged by invading forces in the Tigray region. As troops from the Ethiopian military, Eritrea, as well as Amhara militia groups brutally attack civilians, they have also destroyed religious, historical, and cultural sites of immense value. Some of the damage to these sites has been documented through calls made by Tigrayans using satellite phones. The bombing and destruction of churches, as well as other religious sites, strikes at traditional power structures. These sites are cherished multifunctional gathering places, and sacred spaces. Looting and attacking them is a grave dishonoring of cultural values. A report from the Tigray Orthodox Church Diocese 3 months into the war in February 2021 found 326 members of the priesthood had been killed, while at least 40 churches and monasteries have had a general assessment of damages. Hundreds of such sites have been affected by the war. The writer of the article on The Conversation received confidential local reports from those with satellite phones on the scale of the devastation. Most of the historical artifacts in the country are famous or are originally from today's Tigray. For example, the Aksumite civilization, one of the 4 known civilizations established in the 1st century in addition to Rome, Persia, and China, was in today's central Tigray. Almost all the city-states and centers of civilization prior to the 13th century were found in today's Tigray, Eritrea, and Ago, a highland in today's northern Ethiopia. The Aksumite monuments and Lalibela rock-hewn churches, both UNESCO-registered heritage sites, are among the treasures of the East African civilization. The Alpha syllabic Aksumite writing system, Ge'ez, is the only ancient system still functioning in modern Africa. Ge'ez script is still used in Ethiopia, illustrating that Africa is not only the cradle of people and culture, but also of literacy. Tigray is the foundation for hundreds and thousands of manuscripts and hundreds of inscriptions written in Ge'ez. The world's oldest existent Christian manuscript from the 6th century, the Gospel of Garima, is preserved in central Tigray. Abrahamic religions were introduced in the early ages, Christianity before the 4th century and Islam in the first half of the 7th century in Africa through Tigray. Its early introductions to these monolithic religions and its writing system saw Tigray preserve a huge amount of religious and cultural artifacts. This heritage documents the history of the Ethiopian state and its religious institutions. In the current war, many of Tigray's heritage sites have been targeted by invading troops. The region has thousands of churches, monasteries, mosques, and symbolic Islamic settlements, archaeological sites, museums, and cultural centers. The region has thousands of churches, monasteries, mosques, and symbolic Islamic settlements, archaeological sites, museum, and ritual centers. These spaces are popular with tourists from around the world and pilgrims from across the country. Hundreds of these heritage sites have been destroyed in the ongoing war. For instance, the Church of Aksum Tzion, the head of the Ethiopian churches and monasteries. It is symbolized as the dwelling place of the Ark of the Covenant. It was vandalized after hundreds of civilians were massacred around its yard by Eritrean soldiers in November 2020. The Al-Nagashi Mosque, a symbol for the first introduction of Islam in Africa, was bombed in December 2020. Precious medieval manuscripts have been burned and vandalized. Thousands of artifacts have been looted and smuggled for an international market. The conversation urged the global community to step in to address the continuing loss of human lives and salvage Tigray's cultural heritage. It warned that the destruction of the region's tangible heritage and vandalizing of its monuments of intangible value may lead to irreversible cultural shocks and social collapse.
That concludes our news for today. Hope you guys have a great day. Bye-bye.